Everybody has a story, but certainly not every story makes it to the screen. Our guest today has spent years writing, teaching, consulting, and helping shape stories across television, theater, and film. She has taught screenwriting at Pepperdine University and Santa Monica College, worked in development and production, and continues helping writers turn ideas into stories that resonate. Today we talk storytelling, Hollywood myths, creativity, rejection, resilience, and what really separates good writing from forgettable writing. Lynn Grant Beck, welcome to Unscripted.
Oh, thank you, Jorge.
Your career spans theater, television, and writing. What is the one thread that connects all these genres?
I would have to say at this stage, of our history, I like to think of writers as peddlers of hope. When I taught at Pepperdine, I taught a graduate level screenwriting class. And one of the first things I always do is I ask my students, why do you write? And I was expecting answers like, I want to change the world. I want to make my mark. And the first girl said she struggled so badly from social anxiety and depression that she was writing to connect with other people. And I was astounded because the other kids went around and pretty much everyone had the same story. So I find this very troubling because, if you take the long lens, it's actually a pretty good time to live, right? And it's a pretty good place to live. But these poor young people, they just all day, every day get the doom and gloom through their phones. So as a teacher, as a writer, I think it's our job to just remind people of the human experience that life has never been easy, but at the end of the day, there always must be hope.
Was there a specific moment in your office, when you were writing, or in a classroom, when writing became more than just a craft? It became the way that you see the world.
Hmm. Yes, I think there was. I think the magic of being a playwright or a screenwriter is, we have very few tools. So we basically have dialogue and action. It's when you get to know your characters so well that they write the story for you. They come up with lines that you swear aren't your lines. And I wrote a play, and it was very whimsical and it was very creative. And I think what it did for me is a lot of people think that playwriting is very limiting because you're on a small stage, but actually it's can be far more creative than screenwriting because you're only limited by your imagination. And I told a story with two families living in a similar house during the same time, and it was a beautiful experience because in LA you have access to incredible talent, and these 8 actors, they just poured their heart and soul in it, and it was a beautiful, beautiful story. It was so collaborative, and we actually got standing ovations every night.
You've lived through personal and cultural upheaval. How did that shape your belief that writers are just bearing witness to their time?
Well, like I said, life is not easy, but I think what we realize as human beings, but especially as writers, that is actually our trials and tribulations that make us stronger, that give us a better understanding of the world, and really teach us empathy and compassion for people not only in our cultures, but people around the world, right? That there's so much more in common than there are that divide us.
At one point, cancer entered your life in a very personal way. How did you experience time, storytelling, and what is truly important?
Hmm. It actually affected me a great deal. I was lucky in that not all cancer is alike. So physically, I had breast cancer, I had radiation, I had 3 surgeries while juggling a play. But it wasn't nearly as bad as some other people. But what it did for me is it really was a wake-up call. So I was diagnosed at 55, and I think we're all under the impression that we're going to live long, happy, healthy lives. But the truth is, 1 out of 5,000 people makes it to 100. So it did 2 things. One, it really made me wake each day with a new appreciation for the preciousness of life. And the other thing, it made me take stock. Okay, well, if I don't have as much time as I thought, right? We know that the cancer can come back. Of course, anyone can get cancer at any time. What is my legacy? And that's one of the things that really drove me into the youth pickleball league that I created in this new pickleball in prison program.
Did going through something like that change how you approach stories and the emotional connection characters have with the reader or the viewer?
Yes, it really made me decide that I am only going to write quality projects. So I was involved for a little while in short form vertical drama series, something that's come out of China that's very successful, but the writing is terrible. And, had I done it 30 years ago, I probably could have stomached it. It's like very bad soap opera writing and very small. But at this point, when I know that my years may be numbered, no, I'm only going to write things that are really important to me, which was one of the impetus for my book.
Many creative people continue to work through personal struggles. How did that season affect you, and what did it teach you about resilience and your identity as a writer?
Well, we all know the slogan from theater, the show must go on. And I literally was diagnosed after I committed, after I'd put money down to rent this theater. And I didn't share it with my cast and crew because I didn't want pity and I didn't want the pall of cancer to hang over this creative endeavor. Um, but again, I think it just made me have that much more appreciation for each and every day and for all of the people that just put their heart and soul into that production. It was called All American.
Now let's talk about the craft of storytelling. What actually makes a story compelling?
Hmm. Well, because I spent more years doing screenwriting than anything else. It starts from character. In screenwriting, it absolutely starts in character. And I would say more so in television than in film, right? Film is a little bit more plot centered. Um, and then conflict, right? If life comes easily to our characters, it's not very interesting. So once I heard become a sadist to your characters and throw as much as you can because no one gets an easy life. So if they can see through other characters, you know, these characters that have struggles but can surmount them, I think it's actually very inspiring.
What mistakes do aspiring writers make repeatedly?
Off the top of my head, the first thing I would say is they write big budget movies. So, big budget movies, first of all, they're far harder to get produced, but they're being written by A-list screenwriters, right, with A-list agents. What you want to do is you want to start writing low budget screenplays that you can then find, beginning producers, beginning directors, and collaborate and actually get them made.
Can storytelling be taught, or either you have it or you don't?
That's an interesting debate. I think there are some of us who are compelled to tell stories, but what makes a writer is someone who writes. So I think anyone can be a writer. I mean, if I had a dollar for everyone who told me they wanted to write a book, but how many people actually write a book? But it's a craft, just like anything else. You're not going to be a great reader, right out of the gate. You have to write and you have to write and you have to write. I think the rule of the 10,000 hours is holds very true in writing. So the better, the more time that you spend, the better we get. And also, you cannot be too precious with your writing. You have to share it, right? You have to get feedback from people that have been in the game a long time and trust them.
At what point can you tell if a screenplay has real potential?
So, a well written screenplay, every scene pushes the story forward. It pushes the scene, to the next scene, to the next scene, to the next scene. So if you read a screenplay that you can't put down, that will translate very well to the screen because it will be a movie or a television series that we don't want to turn off.
Now, what makes audiences emotionally invested in a character?
That which is most personal is most precious. So people don't go to the movies to see superheroes, flying, burning down buildings. Every story has to have an emotional heart, and people have to see themselves in the story. I also believe a lot in theme. Themes are what make stories relevant and really resonate.
Has streaming changed storytelling for better or worse?
Um, I would say for better. Um, if you go to the multiplex, often there's nothing there I want to see because it's, the ninth version of some movie. And I think we're all tired of superhero stories. But I think with television, first of all, it's collaborative, right? So you get a group of writers in a room that get to feed off each other's creative energy. They're throwing a lot of money at it. And also with technology, there's really nothing that they can't do now. So I think streaming is a boon. I mean, professionally for writers, it's gotten very tough because, back in the olden days when I went to work, you had 22 episodes for the broadcast show. So that was a lot of work. And now, even successful writers, they may be on a show that has 6, 8, maybe 10 episodes in a season, and then they're done and they're back to square one. Also, you don't learn as much as you used to because often you're in the writer's room and then your job is done. You're not really taken through the production process. So I think in those terms, it's a negative. But I think in terms of storytelling, I mean, I think we have better stories on TV than we've ever had. If anything, there's too much, right? You don't know where to start.
Now let's go to Hollywood. What misconceptions do people have about Hollywood and screenwriting?
That it's glamorous. um, Hollywood is a very difficult place to work. Um, There's a lot of immoral people. There's a lot of dishonesty. There are a lot of egos. There's a lot of abuse. And for a long time, people got away with it because there were 20 people for every one job. Also, in terms of film production, it is backbreaking, long hours, dirty work. So I think the public sees the Oscars and think it's all like glamorous, but just like any other job, there's a lot of hard work and a lot of nuts and bolts that go into being a screenwriter.
What separates a good idea from something that can sustain a screenplay or a series?
Well, I worked for a producer once and he told me that ideas are cheap, meaning 10 people might have the same good idea, but actually it's the execution, right, that takes a good idea into a well written story.
Here's a question I'm sure many have. Can a talented, unknown writer still make it in Hollywood today?
I think they have to put their work in. Hollywood loves to tell the story of someone who just wrote their first screenplay and made it big. Well, it's never their first screenplay. It's usually their 10th screenplay, maybe their 20th screenplay. So, the successful screenwriters I know also happen to be the hardest working screenwriters. They put their time in, right? They don't think, "Oh, well, do I have the muse today? Should I write? Do I feel like writing?" No, they set office hours and they write 4 hours a day every day. So, are we born with talent or do we create talent? I mean, it's hard to say, but I think like anything, you have to spend time learning and you have to spend time practicing.
How much of success is talent versus luck, timing, and relationships?
I think it's probably all of the above. Um, I think it's one reason it is easier to start in a place like LA or New York because you do need to make your connections. I also highly recommend that aspiring screenwriters get a job at a production company. One, so they really understand the nuts and bolts of how a screenplay, because a screenplay is actually just a blueprint, right? So, how a screenplay is turned into a movie, but also to start making those connections because people you start with, especially when you're young, they rise up the ladder of success pretty quickly. So you need to know directors, producers, agents, and if you live in Wisconsin, can it be done? It can, but it's a lot harder than if you move to these places and you're making those connections.
Today, one can find all kinds of services being offered to writers. What advice do you have for new writers or writers who are trying to make it before they spend money contracting for these services being offered to everybody?
Beware. Beware. Usually, legitimate people are not going to charge you money. Maybe the one exception is screenplay contests. But still, unless you win, like take first place in Nichols, like one of the really legitimate screenplay contests, it doesn't do you much good, except you can use that, right? Then to put on your resume, to open doors, to put on your websites. But I think that most Jorge are very predatory. Most legitimate people in the business are not going to charge you money.
What makes someone difficult to work with in this industry?
Huh. Well, I worked in production companies for many years, and Maybe the most difficult thing for me was the dishonesty. When I was an assistant, people would ask me to lie on their behalf, and that was really tough for me. And I think people can also be really abusive in a way that was accepted in Hollywood that there's no way it would be accepted in other places. So I think if I were to restart my career, I would probably lean into more academia and theater than Hollywood.
Just between you and me, off the record, actors.
Well, I'll tell you the biggest mistake I ever made with actors, and I only did it once, is to say to an actor, well, the script isn't set in stone. So if you have any ideas, because literally they would go through and count their lines and be like, well, she has 14 and I only have 12. So can you write me more lines? So yeah, we don't ask actors for their feedback on scripts.
How do writers survive rejection?
That's a hard one. That's a really hard one. I think you have to feel the grief of rejection because as writers, we really need to feel our emotions. And, we can spend a year or longer on a script. And when it's rejected, it's kind of like having your child rejected and it hurts. However, you must move through that grief. And the only way to get through it is to start the next one. And to know that truly no writing is ever wasted because it's always a learning process. And often, if you don't sell a script, it can still be used as a writing sample. So never regret time writing, but know that your sales, are going to be few and far between. So you just have to put the work in and keep writing.
What is the biggest misconception students have about writing for the screen?
I think they all think they're going to sell their first screenplay. And, if you ask successful screenwriters what they thought about their first screenplay, they will all tell you it was terrible, right? But the first time screenwriter thinks their screenplay is excellent. Well, it's like anything else we do in life, it takes practice. It takes skill to develop your craft. The other thing that is shocking to me is how student screenwriters don't spend time reading screenplays. That is as absurd as a novel writing, right, not as a novel writer never having read a book. So one of the best things you can do to learn how to write a marketable, professional, profound screenplay is pick the screenplays of the movies that really touched you or TV shows and read the scripts and see how they did it.
Do people underestimate how difficult rewriting actually is?
Absolutely. And rewriting is really where the magic happens. I think knowing that actually helps us take a little bit of pressure off the first draft. I've heard some people call it the vomit draft. I don't like that personally because I don't like to think of writing ever as vomit. But if you think of it as sort of free form, where you're not putting a lot of pressure on yourself, knowing it's not going to be perfect, but you need to get those words on the page, then knowing you're going to get feedback and you're going to get feedback sooner rather than later. I've had a lot of people come to me and they say, hey, will you read my screenplay? I think it's ready. Well, it's not anywhere near ready, but it would have been far more useful had they even talked to me about the idea, right? Because if someone writes an idea that's not marketable, it's a little late for me to tell them that after they spent 2 years on the script. So create a circle of writers that you trust and help each other out. And also create accountability for each other.
Have you ever seen a student that has struggled and suddenly gets it? Something clicks.
Yes, I do think sometimes the lights come on, and it's sort of similar to what I was saying before when the magic of writing takes over. Um, when I teach, we spend a lot of time developing our characters and really getting to know them. And the magic happens when you put characters in a scene and then the characters create that scene and really just create something profound. And you're thinking, where did that come from? That to me is the magic of screenwriting.
Do writers sabotage themselves? If so, how?
I think they do. I mean, first of all, you have to know that you're in it for the long game. So if you quit, after one rejection, then this is not the business for you. I mean, literally, it can take decades to be a successful screenwriter. So you have to keep the faith. As hard as it is, it's just like anything in life. Like you have to keep that belief in yourself because your belief in yourself will translate to others believing in you. So, for example, one of the things that was very useful to me when I worked as an assistant for a producer is I got to be on all the phone calls. Well, one of the things I noticed with the more beginner writers, when they turned in a script, they would say things like, "Oh, well, I hope I got this right. I hope you like it. I hope it's good enough." But the experience, successful screenwriters, when they turned a script in, they would say, "This is it. I nailed it. You are going to love it." And what was amazing is the producer would then turn around and say the same thing, positive or negative, to the owner of the company. "Well, this new writer turned it in. I hope we're going to like it. I'm not sure," right? Or, "We just got this script from our A-list, writer and he nailed it. We're going to love it. This is going to be a go production." So you don't want to be cocky, but confidence in Hollywood goes a long way.
Do different genres require different creative muscles?
Yes, I think they do. That's also a debate in Hollywood. Some people believe it's better to stick with one genre because then you're known as that, rom-com person or action person. But I personally feel as a writer that that's very limiting because I believe the more we expand our genres, the better it is. When I started, so I moved to California in 1999. And at the time, believe it or not, like it was pretty difficult for female screenwriters, which makes no sense. But at the time, pretty much the door was open in rom-coms. Well, then rom-coms became very raunchy. They destroyed their audience and they went away. And so then it was really tough. So I think it's important, like when I teach action, thriller, mystery, like I make sure women learn those genres because that's where the real money is. And, this is a little, but you don't need a penis to write those kind of screenplays.
Which project feels most personal to you and why?
I would say it was my play. I started as a writer, as a playwright in New York City, in my early 20s, and I loved it, but it was very difficult because it's very difficult to make money in theater. And so I moved to California when I was 29, and I segued into Hollywood. And returning to theater just reminded me of what I love. First of all, theater people are theater people around the world. I also worked in theater in Russia. They're just a much more collaborative, supportive, loving community. You don't have the egos, you don't have the money, you have a lot of outside the box people. Um, and I just looked forward coming to work. One of my actors said to me, Lynn, we know you poured your heart and soul into this script. And so we poured our hearts and souls into this production. And it showed. It was a really beautiful experience. And it was a nice way for me to leave LA.
Tell me about a project that was very important to you. You truly believed in it, but it didn't quite make it. What did you learn from it?
Oh, it's so hard, Jorge. I had a project that I really loved. It was called Fusion, The Rise of Robo Sapiens. And it's basically what's happening with our fusion with technology, right? We're creating super soldiers with technology. Elon Musk is literally putting chips in our brain that are going to give us, Wi-Fi abilities. And as a writer, that intrigued me in terms of what that means, right, for the future of humanity. Are we going to hit singularity, like Kurzweil predicted? And so I had this set up at a major production company, and I was excited because I worked hard and I really hit it off with the executive. And, we were starting to shop it. And then they acquired the Green Lantern that they had been looking to acquire for years and years. And so they sidelined my project. And has the Green Lantern been made? No, it has not. But unfortunately, it's the nature of the business.
What are you working on now, and why does it excite you?
So I just finished a nonfiction book, which is very new for me, called Dink, Drive, Thrive, How Pickleball Transforms Lives. And I absolutely loved self-publishing. I hadn't anticipated publishing my book that way. I was going to go the traditional route. But I just love that one of the things that's truly challenging to be a writer is that you have to have other people approve of your work, right? They have to give you their approval. Well, when you self-publish, you don't. You write exactly what you want, right? What's in your heart and what's in your mind. So I am definitely going to write a book as my next project. It may be on coaching because I have already created a lot of lesson plans and have that book written, or I may turn one of my pilots into a book. So we'll see.
We're going to do what they used to call years ago the lightning round on game shows. Best screenplay ever written.
It's a Wonderful Life.
Most underrated film.
Lawrence of Arabia.
Storytelling pet peeve.
When you hear same information more than once.
A film everyone loves but you think is overrated.
Pretty Woman. I hate it.
Favorite advice for writers.
You don't need permission to write. Get up in the morning and write. Carry a pen with you at all times because you never know when the muse will strike.
What story still keeps calling you?
It might be the story that I'm thinking of turning into a book. It's called The House That Jackie Built.
After everything that you've experienced in life, what do you hope people take away from the role that storytelling plays in helping us make sense of the world?
You know, I think that storytelling has always been important, but perhaps it's more important than ever. There's so much dissension in this world, especially through social media. It's the stories that we tell that really bring us together and teach us that we have far more in common than our differences.
Lynn, thank you so much for taking time and joining us in UNSCRIPTED.